Kylos felt a lump form in his throat. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was real, it felt almost impossible to believe. "We've come to bring you home," he said softly, taking a step toward her. "The Queen misses you. She's been waiting for you." Ilara's eyes softened, but there was no joy in her gaze. Instead, there was an air of something else, something darker. "I have no home to return to," she replied, her voice firm but tinged with a sense of resignation. "Not the one you remember. Things have changed, Kylos." The captain took another step forward, eager to understand, to hear the story that had remained hidden for so long. "What do you mean? The Queen has been grieving for you all these years. I know what she's been doing," Ilara interrupted, her tone sharper now. "And I know what the Empire has been doing, but I cannot go back to that place. Not anymore." Kylos felt a pang of confusion and fear in his chest. What had happened to her? Why was she so distant, so cold? And who were the two children standing quietly behind her, holding her hands? It was then that Ilara finally stepped aside, allowing Kylos and the others to see the full picture. Behind her stood two children, both human, a young boy and a girl, no older than 6 or 7. Their faces were innocent, their eyes wide with curiosity. They looked at the strangers with a mix of confusion and cautious interest, as if they had never seen anyone like them before. But what struck Kylos most was the way Ilara held their hands. She looked at them with a tenderness that was foreign to him, a softness he had never seen in the princess before. "These are my children," Ilara said quietly, her voice filled with a quiet pride. "They are the reason I cannot return to the Empire. They are my future. And they are the future of this world." She had already lost so much. She couldn't lose her cub too. The forest was silent as Vera moved deeper into the jungle. The trees were so thick in places that the sunlight barely touched the ground, but Vera knew every path. She had walked these woods countless times in the past, before the humans came. Now, the once familiar paths seemed like a maze, twisting and turning with danger lurking at every corner. Vera pushed on, her heart racing in her chest as she searched for something that could sustain her cub. Hours passed and still she found nothing. Her frustration grew, but so did her determination. Her cub depended on her. She could not fail it. Finally, she heard it. The faint rustle of movement. Vera's ears perked up and she froze, listening intently. She could hear the sounds of small creatures moving through the brush, and her mouth watered at the thought of food. Carefully, she approached the source of the noise, her steps silent and cautious. She spotted a small creature, no larger than her cub, foraging for food near the base of a tree. Vera's eyes locked onto the animal, and in one fluid motion she pounced. The creature barely had time to react before Vera's sharp claws sank into its flesh. The struggle was brief, and soon Vera held her prize in her paws. She didn't waste any time. Without hesitation, she began to tear into the creature, her hunger pushing her to eat quickly. She was aware of the danger the humans posed, and she didn't want to linger in one place for too long. She needed to return to her cub. But before she could finish her meal, a sudden sound broke the silence, a loud crack, followed by the unmistakable hum of machinery. Vera's heart skipped a beat. Her ears flicked back and she instantly crouched low, her fur bristling with fear. The humans were here. She knew they would come eventually. It was inevitable, but she hadn't expected them to be so close. Panic surged through her veins, but she kept her composure. She had no choice but to move quickly. She grabbed what was left of the small creature, her sharp claws cutting through the meat with ease, and darted for cover. Vera made her way deeper into the forest, trying to stay hidden in the thick underbrush. The sounds of the human machines grew louder, and she could feel the weight of their presence pressing in on her. She had to keep moving, keep her cub safe. The forest, once her sanctuary, now felt like a trap. As she moved swiftly through the jungle, Vera's mind raced. She knew that the humans were searching for her kind, and they would stop at nothing to wipe them out. The thought of her cub being captured or worse, killed, sent a wave of cold dread over her. She couldn't allow that to happen. Not now. Not ever. The cub needed her. It was her responsibility to protect it, no matter what. Vera pushed on, not looking back, even as the sounds of the human search grew closer. She had to get back to her den. It was the only place where her cub would be safe for now. But fate had other plans. Without warning, Vera felt something tighten around her legs. She tried to fight it, but the trap snapped shut with a violent force. The pain was sharp and immediate, and she cried out in frustration. She had been caught. The snare had been set by the humans. It was a trap designed to capture creatures like her, but Vera didn't give up. She struggled fiercely against the trap, her muscles straining as she tried to break free. But the more she fought, the more the trap tightened, and soon her vision began to blur from exhaustion. In the distance, she heard the human machines approaching. She knew that they were closing in on her. She had to escape. But with every movement, the trap held her tighter. She could feel her strength draining away, and with it, the hope that she would ever see her cub again. Vera's thoughts raced as the world around her started to fade. She couldn't die like this, not without saving her cub, but her body refused to listen. The trap, the pain, and the fear had taken their toll. Her last thought before everything went dark was of her cub, the little one that depended on her. She had failed. The world was a blur of shapes and sounds. Vera struggled to wake from the deep fog that clouded her mind, the weight of exhaustion pressing heavily on her body. She felt pain in her legs where the trap had bitten into her flesh, but the worst of it was the gnawing emptiness in her chest. The hunger, the fear, and the despair all mixed into a painful reality that she couldn't escape. Yet, despite everything, Vera was alive. The first thing that hit her as she regained consciousness was the softness beneath her. It wasn't the cold, rough ground of the forest floor she knew so well. It wasn't the sharp rocks or the thick moss that usually cushioned her movements. This was something different, something soft and warm. She tensed, her muscles instinctively coiling in preparation for flight, but her body refused to move. A strange scent filled the air, sterile and unfamiliar. It didn't smell like the forest, nor did it smell like the humans who had hunted her. Vera blinked her eyes open, trying to focus, but the world was still spinning around her. Above her, a strange figure moved. A human, she could tell by the height and the shape of its body. The figure was dressed differently from the one she had seen before. It wore a uniform of some kind, but it was cleaner, more controlled. The human's face was sharp, and there was something in its eyes that made Vera pause. It wasn't the cold, calculating look that she had seen in others of its kind. This human's eyes were softer, filled with something she couldn't name. Compassion. Was that possible? She had been taught that the humans only understood power and violence. Was it possible that this one didn't belong to that world? The human moved closer, and Vera instinctively shrank back, her body tensing, ready to flee. But then she felt a strange calm settle over her. It wasn't a trick. The human wasn't making any sudden moves. It wasn't advancing to strike her down. Instead, it knelt beside her, carefully lifting her injured legs from the trap that had caught her. The human's hands were steady, gentle even, as it worked to free her. Vera tried to push herself away, but her limbs felt like they were made of stone. She was too weak to fight, too broken to escape. After what felt like an eternity, the human finally pulled her free. Vera let out a weak growl, warning the human to stay back, but she had no strength left in her. She collapsed, her head spinning and her breathing shallow. The pain in her legs was unbearable, and the exhaustion from the days of hunger and fear left her with no will to resist. The human didn't speak, but Vera could hear it moving around her, working quietly. It was preparing something, and after a moment, Vera felt something cool and soothing placed on her injured legs. The strange substance smelled unfamiliar, but it felt calming. It was different from the medicines she had seen humans use to treat their wounds, but it didn't hurt. If anything, it made her feel better, though she couldn't understand why. Vera could feel herself slipping back into unconsciousness, but a strange sensation kept her from falling too deeply into sleep. The human's presence lingered, offering some kind of protection, though Vera couldn't explain it. It was a feeling she had never experienced from any human before, a soft, quiet understanding, like the human was trying to help, not harm. As time passed, Vera's thoughts became clearer. She needed to move to escape to return to her cub. But the pain in her legs was too much, and her body was far too weak to make such a journey. She couldn't let the humans take her. She couldn't let them hurt her cub. The human's voice broke through her thoughts, but it was gentle, low. She could barely make out the words, but there was no mistaking the tone. It was concerned. "You're safe here," the human said, its voice soft and surprisingly calm. "I won't hurt you." Vera's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to make sense of the words. Could this human really mean it? Could there be a human who cared? Could there be one who wasn't part of the destruction of her world? The human continued speaking, but Vera couldn't focus. The pain in her legs and the weariness of her body overwhelmed her senses, and soon her world faded to black once again. When Vera awoke again, the pain had lessened, but it was still there, a constant reminder of the trap that had nearly killed her. She could feel the weight of her injuries, but it was as if the healing process had begun. It wasn't much, but it was something. The strange, soft bed beneath her was still there, and so was the human, watching over her quietly. This time, Vera didn't fight the human's presence. She didn't want to, not anymore. She still couldn't trust it completely, but there was no denying that this human had done something for her that no other human had. It had saved her life when it could have just as easily let her die in the trap. Vera slowly turned her head and glanced up at the human, meeting its eyes. There was no malice there, no hatred. Instead, there was something she had never seen before in a human: kindness. The human didn't speak this time. It simply sat beside her, its presence calming her. Vera was still unsure of everything, but she couldn't deny that something had shifted. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel completely alone in this fight. It was a strange feeling, and it made her uncomfortable. But it also gave her something she hadn't had in what felt like forever: hope. Vera closed her eyes again, letting herself rest, though her thoughts were still heavy. She needed to get back to her cub. The cub needed her. She couldn't stay here forever, and she certainly couldn't trust this human completely. But something about the way the human had treated her, with patience and care, made her question everything she had known about the humans who had destroyed her world. Hours passed, and Vera gradually regained some strength. The human had left her alone for a while, but she could feel its presence nearby, watching over her. It hadn't abandoned her. Maybe it wasn't like the others. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Vera tried to stand. The human was right there, watching her closely, but it didn't move to stop her. Vera's legs wobbled beneath her, and for a moment she thought she might fall. But the human was there, steadying her with a gentle hand. Vera tensed, still unsure, but the human's touch was light and reassuring. With its help, Vera slowly made her way to the edge of the room. She couldn't stay here. She had to get back to her cub. But her body was weak, and every step was a struggle. The human spoke again, its voice quiet but firm. "You're not ready to move yet. Stay with me until you heal." Vera wanted to protest, to argue, but something in the human's voice stopped her. She didn't have the strength to fight, and she couldn't deny that the human's presence, though strange, made her feel safer than she had in a long time. For the first time in what felt like forever, Vera allowed herself to rest. She wasn't sure what the future held. She wasn't sure if she could ever trust this human. But in that moment, she knew one thing: she wasn't alone anymore. And that, for now, was enough. Vera's strength slowly returned over the days that followed. The pain in her legs lessened, and the sharp sting of her wounds faded into a dull ache. She could feel the power returning to her muscles. though the memory of the trap still lingered in her mind, reminding her of how close she had come to losing everything. The strange human who had helped her, a soldier named Evan, continued to stay by her side, offering what little care he could. His presence was a strange comfort, though Vera was still unsure whether she could trust him completely. Evan didn't push her. He didn't ask her to speak or reveal anything about herself. He simply remained nearby, often silent, but always watchful. It was as if he understood the weight of her distrust and fear. And while Vera could never fully abandon her instincts, she could sense that there was something different about him. It wasn't like the other humans she had encountered, who had destroyed her tribe and brought chaos to her world. There was something in the way Evan moved, the way he spoke softly, and the way he treated her wounds with gentle hands. It was something that Vera hadn't seen in humans before: empathy. She hated herself for the way her mind kept drifting to him. She hated that she couldn't push away the tiny thread of hope that grew inside her. She had been betrayed by her own kind, let alone these invaders, and yet here she was, allowing herself to be cared for by one of them. It felt wrong. It felt dangerous. Still, her body needed the rest. It needed time to heal, and Evan was the only one who could provide that. Vera couldn't afford to stay in one place for too long. She had her cub to think about. But as the days passed, she couldn't ignore the growing bond between her and the human. She wasn't sure what it meant, but she knew it couldn't end here. She needed to get back to her cub. She had to make sure her cub was safe, no matter the cost. One evening, after the sun had dipped below the horizon and the air had turned cooler, Vera felt strong enough to move. Her legs still ached, but she could walk. She could make it back to the forest, back to the den where she had left her cub. It was time to leave. She stood slowly, testing her weight on her legs. They trembled slightly, but they held her. She was ready. She had to go. But as she stepped forward, Evan appeared in the doorway, blocking her path. "Where are you going?" he asked quietly, his voice tinged with concern. His gaze softened as he watched her, sensing her determination. "You're not ready to leave yet." Vera felt a surge of frustration. She didn't need him to tell her what to do. She didn't need anyone. She had made it this far on her own, and she would continue to do so. She wasn't afraid of him, but she was afraid of what staying might mean. Staying meant trusting him, and trust had become a luxury she could no longer afford. "I have to go," Vera said, her voice low but firm. "My cub, it needs me." Evan's eyes flickered with understanding, but he didn't argue. Instead, he stepped aside, allowing her to pass. Vera hesitated for a moment, sensing his reluctance, but she couldn't stay. Not anymore. The weight of her cub's absence was too great to ignore. She stepped out into the cool night air, the stars above her shining brightly in the clear sky. The forest stretched out before her, a familiar, dark silhouette against the glowing moon. The sounds of the jungle filled the night, a symphony of insects, distant animal calls, and the rustling of leaves. It felt like home, but it also felt dangerous. Vera's eyes narrowed as she scanned the darkened landscape. She knew that the humans were still out there, patrolling, searching. She had no idea how far Evan's protection would extend or if he would even come looking for her once she left. But that was a risk she was willing to take. She had no other choice. She had to protect her cub. She couldn't rely on anyone else. Her steps were light, but her mind raced with thoughts of the cub, the future, and what would happen when she finally returned to the den. Would her cub be safe? Would the humans be waiting for her? She had no answers, only uncertainty. The forest grew thicker as she walked, the trees closing in around her. It was as if the jungle itself was closing off her escape, but she refused to turn back. The path felt familiar, but now it was darker, more menacing. The shadows seemed to shift, and every crack of a branch beneath her feet made her jump. Vera couldn't help but feel the weight of the forest pressing down on her. She continued forward, moving with careful steps, trying to avoid any unnecessary noise. She knew the humans were close. She could hear the distant hum of their machines, their voices faint but growing louder as they scoured the forest. Vera pushed herself harder, faster, desperate to reach her cub. The minutes turned into hours, and the air grew heavier with the scent of impending rain. Vera's legs were starting to ache again, but she refused to stop. She couldn't. She had made a promise to her cub. And then, just as she was beginning to think she couldn't go any further, a faint, familiar sound reached her ears. The soft, delicate cry of her cub echoed through the trees. Vera's heart skipped a beat. It was the sound she had been waiting for. Kylo stood frozen, unable to speak for a moment. The princess, the lost heir, had not only survived but had built a life among humans, and these children were the product of that life. The implications of her words began to settle in, and Kylos felt a mix of awe and fear. The Empire would not take kindly to this. "Are you asking us to leave?" he finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Are you telling us that you've chosen this life over your birthright?" Ilara's gaze softened, and for the first time, Kylos saw the vulnerability beneath her calm exterior. "I'm not asking you to leave, Kylos. I'm telling you that this is my life now, and I won't go back to the Empire, not for anything." The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the weight of what had just been revealed. Kylos looked at the children, at the woman who had once been his princess, and he realized that everything he knew had just changed. The princess wasn't the same person he remembered. She had grown, evolved, and found something he never thought possible, a family, a future that didn't belong to the Empire. "Then we have much to discuss," Kylo said quietly, his mind racing with the consequences of Ilara's words. "The Queen will want to know everything. She deserves to know the truth." Ilara's eyes flickered with something close to regret, but she shook her head. "The truth, Kylos, is something the Empire can never understand, but I will tell you what you need to know. There's more at stake now than just our family. The Empire is about to face a change, and I will be at the center of it." With that, the conversation ended, and Kylos was left standing in the doorway, staring at the woman he once knew as a princess, now a mother and leader of something much larger than he could comprehend. The galaxy would never be the same again. The next few days in the colony passed slowly for Kylos. He spent most of his time trying to understand the situation, questioning every choice he had made. His mission was clear: to bring Princess Ilara back to the Empire, to restore her to her rightful place beside her mother, the Queen. But the more he spent time with her, the more it seemed like the galaxy he knew was slipping away. Everything he believed in, the structure of the Empire, the power it held, the order it provided, seemed fragile now, as if it could crumble at any moment. Ilara was a different person from the princess he remembered. She was no longer the young woman filled with ambition, who dreamed of one day ruling the Empire. Now she was a mother, a protector, a woman who had seen the worst of the world and chosen a different path. She was no longer just a daughter of the Queen. She had become something else entirely, a leader in her own right, with a family of her own, and a vision for the future that had nothing to do with the Empire. Kylos had never seen the princess like this before. She had always been full of life, passionate about her people and her future, but now there was a calmness to her that was both unsettling and admirable. It was as if she had found peace in a place far away from the Empire's reach. As he sat in his small quarters, staring at the data feeds from the Empire, Kylos couldn't help but feel a deep sense of conflict. The Queen had sent him here to bring the princess back, to end her exile and restore order. But now, Kylos wasn't sure if he could carry out that mission. He had spent years serving the Queen, loyally and without question. But the more he learned about Ilara's life on the colony, the more he realized that her vision of the galaxy might be the future humanity needed. It wasn't the future that the Empire had planned, but perhaps it was the one that the universe needed. The sounds of the colony, the hum of the old machines, the gentle whisper of the wind through the trees, seemed foreign to Kylos. He had been raised in the heart of the Empire, in the shining cities of advanced technology and gleaming towers. He had always thought of the Outer Rim colonies as primitive, a place for forgotten people and abandoned projects. But here, in this quiet corner of the universe, he saw something different. The people here weren't just surviving, they were thriving, in ways that the Empire had long since forgotten. Kylos had spent hours walking through the colony, trying to understand the life that Alara had built. It wasn't easy. The people here were wary of outsiders, and the small community had grown protective of its secrets. But in time, Kylos managed to earn their trust. He learned that they were not simply survivors of a forgotten world, but a group of people who had chosen to live differently. They were a mix of humans, descendants of the old colony settlers, and alien refugees who had fled the Empire's reach. At first, Ilara had kept her distance from the visitors. She had no interest in returning to the Empire, no desire to be part of the system that had betrayed her. But as the days passed, Kylos began to see the cracks in her resolve. She was still the princess he had once known, brave, determined, and unwilling to back down from what she believed was right. But now, she had a family, and that family had become her priority. Her children, two young human kids, were not just her responsibility. They were her future, and they were the future of this colony. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant mountains, Kylos found himself sitting beside Alara on the balcony of her modest home. The air was warm, and the sky was painted with vibrant shades of red and purple. It was a peaceful moment, one that seemed so far removed from the chaos and violence of the Empire. "I never thought I'd see you again," Kylos said quietly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "You were a beacon of hope, Ilara. The Queen believed in you, we all did, and now here you are living in a place like this, with them." Ilara didn't answer at first. She sat in silence, her eyes scanning the sky as if searching for something she couldn't quite find. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost sorrowful. "I know what you're thinking, Kylos," she said, her tone steady. "You think I've abandoned everything, my family, my people, my future. But you're wrong. I haven't abandoned anyone. I've simply chosen a different path. One that doesn't involve the Empire." Kylos looked at her, his brow furrowed in confusion. "But the Empire is your birthright. You were meant to lead it." Ilara turned to face him then, her eyes intense. "No, Kylos, I wasn't meant to lead the Empire. I was meant to change it. But I can't do that from within. I tried, and look what happened. I saw how the Empire treats its own people, how it crushes anyone who dares to question it. I couldn't be a part of that any longer." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But I've found something here. A life that's not based on power or control. A life that's about freedom, about living with purpose. These people, they're not perfect, but they've built something beautiful. They've created a community, a place where people can live without fear. Where they can be themselves, without the weight of the Empire on their shoulders." Kylos was silent for a moment, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He had never seen things this way before. He had been trained to believe that the Empire was the only way, that it was the only thing that could bring order to the galaxy. But now, looking at Alara, at the life she had built with these humans, he wasn't so sure anymore. "You're not asking me to join you, are you?" Kylos asked softly, his voice almost a whisper. Ilara smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "No, Kylos, I'm not asking you to join me, but I am asking you to understand. The Empire is broken, and I can't be a part of it anymore." Her words hung in the air between them, and Kylos could feel the weight of her decision. He had always believed in the Empire, in the order it brought to the galaxy. But now, as he sat next to Alara, surrounded by the quiet beauty of this place, he was beginning to question everything. The next morning, as Kylos and the team prepared to leave the colony, he knew he had a choice to make. He could return to the Empire, report back to the Queen, and bring Alara back with him. He could follow his orders, do his duty, and live the life he had always known. Or he could stay. Stay with Alara and the humans and help her build something new. A future that was free from the Empire's control, a future where people could live on their own terms. Kylos knew what the right choice was, but he also knew that it wasn't going to be easy. The Empire wouldn't let this go. They would come after Alara, after her children. And they would come after him too, if he didn't do his duty. The consequences of defying the Empire were severe, and Kylos had spent his entire life serving it. But in that moment, sitting in the quiet of the colony, he realized that serving the Empire wasn't enough anymore. There had to be more to life than just following orders. That night, as he lay in his quarters, Kylos made a decision. He wouldn't go back to the Empire, not without Alara, not without her children. He had seen the future that she had built here, and he believed in it. It was a future worth fighting for, even if it meant risking everything. As dawn broke over the colony, Kylos stood up, ready to face whatever came next. He had made his choice. And he knew that, whatever happened, he wouldn't regret it. The decision Kylos had made was not one he could take lightly. He had chosen to stay behind with Alara, to side with her, and the people of the colony against the Empire he had once served. His heart felt a strange mix of fear and hope as he watched the sun rise over the distant mountains, casting long shadows over the land. The beauty of the world around him, so different from the sterile, cold environments of the Empire, felt like a dream he had never allowed himself to have. But now that he was living it, there was no turning back. In the days that followed, Kylos spent as much time as he could with Alara, learning about the community she had built. The people here were not just surviving, they were thriving in a way that was unfamiliar to him. There was no grand empire, no towering buildings or grand halls, no advanced technology controlling every aspect of life. Here, in the quiet corners of the galaxy, people lived in a way that was simple, grounded, and free. It was a stark contrast to the life Kylos had known, and for the first time he saw the beauty in it. Alara was a leader, not in the way the Empire had taught him to understand leadership, but in a way that was much more personal. She wasn't concerned with power or control. She cared about her people, about ensuring that they had a safe place to live, a community that was strong and resilient. She spent hours every day talking to the people, listening to their concerns, and helping them solve their problems. Kylos could see how much they respected her, how much they trusted her. She wasn't just a ruler, she was a part of their lives, and they saw her as one of their own. The children, Ilara's children, were the heart of it all. They were young, no more than 6 or 7 years old, but they had a presence about them that Kylos couldn't ignore. The boy, who was a little older than the girl, had a quiet strength in his eyes. He was small but confident, always observing the world around him with a calmness that was rare in children of his age. The girl was more curious, always asking questions, always eager to learn. Kylos could see that they were growing up in a world that was very different from the one he had known. They were not being trained to follow orders or bow to the will of a monarch. They were being raised to think for themselves, to make their own decisions, and to lead in their own way. But Kylos knew that it couldn't last. The Empire would not simply forget about Alara. The Queen had sent him here with the hope that he would bring her back. He had been a loyal servant of the Empire for years, and his mission had always been clear. But now, with each passing day, he knew that his loyalty was being tested in ways he had never imagined. His heart told him that Alara was right. The Empire had become a place of corruption and control, where the powerful crushed the weak and anyone who dared to stand up was punished. But his mind kept returning to the Queen, the woman who had raised him, who had trusted him, who had asked him to bring her daughter home. The tension was growing. Kylos could feel it in the air, like a storm waiting to break. Alara had made it clear that she would never return to the Empire. She had built a life here, and it was one that she would protect with everything she had. But what would happen if the Empire came for her? What would happen to her children, to the people she had come to love? Kylos knew that he couldn't stand by and let the Empire destroy everything she had worked for. But he also knew that defying the Empire would not be without consequences. The Empire was powerful, and it would not tolerate rebellion. As Kylos walked through the streets of the colony, he saw the people going about their daily lives. They were simple people, farmers, workers, families. But there was a sense of peace here that Kylos had never felt in the Empire. They didn't have the wealth or the technology of the Empire, but they had something far more important: freedom. They were not bound by the rules of the Empire, not controlled by the whims of a distant ruler. They were free to live their lives as they saw fit, without fear of being punished for their choices. Kylos stopped in front of a small house, where Ilara was speaking with a group of villagers. They were discussing the needs of the community, the resources they needed to survive the coming winter. Kylos had never seen Ilara like this before. She was so different from the princess he had known, the ambitious young woman who had dreamed of ruling the galaxy. Now she was focused on the people around her, listening to their concerns, making decisions that would affect their lives in ways that were more personal than political. She's a natural, Kylos thought, watching her as she spoke. She has become the leader this place needs. The leader she was always meant to be. The realization hit him hard. Ilara had never needed the Empire. She had never needed the throne or the power that came with it. She had always been destined for something greater, something that didn't involve ruling over others but helping them. She had built this life from nothing, and she had done it with love and care. Kylos couldn't help but admire her. And for the first time, he felt a sense of pride in her that went beyond duty or loyalty to the Empire. She had found her own path, and she was leading others along with her. But the storm was coming. Kylos knew it. He had to make a decision. He could stay here, fight alongside Ilara, and protect this place that had become a home for so many. Or he could return to the Empire, report to the Queen, and fulfill his mission. The choice was his, but the consequences would be far-reaching. The Empire would not let Ilara go easily, and once Kylos made his decision, there would be no turning back. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Kylos sat with Ilara on the balcony of her home. The sky was a deep orange and the stars were beginning to appear in the twilight. It was a peaceful moment, but Kylos could feel the tension in the air. Ilara sat quietly, her eyes focused on the horizon, lost in thought. "I know what you're thinking," Ilara said quietly, breaking the silence. "You're wondering if you made the right choice, if you should have gone back to the Empire, completed your mission." Kylos didn't answer immediately. He didn't know what to say. His heart was torn between two worlds, the world he had known and the one he was beginning to believe in. "I don't know anymore," he admitted after a long pause. "I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I'm not so sure." Ilara looked at him, her expression soft but firm. "It's not easy, Kylos, I know that. But sometimes doing the right thing means making hard choices. It means standing up for what you believe in, even when it's not the popular choice. You have to trust yourself." Kylos nodded slowly, taking in her words. It wasn't easy, no matter how he looked at it, but he knew she was right. This was his choice, and it would define the rest of his life. The next morning, the sound of distant engines interrupted the quiet of the colony. Kylos stood up, his heart racing. He knew what that sound meant. The Empire was coming. It wasn't just a matter of choice anymore. It was a matter of survival. The storm had arrived. And now, Kylos would have to decide if he was ready to stand with Ilara, to fight for the future she had created, or if he would return to the Empire and become a part of the system that had turned its back on everything he now believed in. As the distant ships appeared in the sky, Kylos took a deep breath and looked at Ilara. This was it, the moment of truth.